Okay, now let me give you a very short introduction about the scenario. In a general scenario, corporate companies need to share data and information between their offices in a secure way. They have different options like internet, VPN, lease lines, etc. But while considering the security, the priority goes to point-to-point WAN connectivity between locations provided by local service provider. These are called lease lines. Okay, tell me, what are lease lines? It's a very simple thing. A lease line is a dedicated connection between two locations. It's provided by a telecommunication provider exclusively for the subscriber. There are many telecommunication providers who provide lease lines. We can choose a service provider who meets our criteria like the locations, the distance between locations, and the cost. This is a scenario which we work on. Here we have a head office with a couple of servers, PCs and other devices. At the branch office, there are user PCs accessing data and applications from the head office server. We have connected the two locations using a 2 Mbps lease line which is procured from a local service provider. We'll be using this live network in this tutorial video. Now we will look at this closely and understand the technology behind this. First one is WAN connectivity. Here we use a 2 Mbps dedicated lease line connectivity between the two offices provided by one of the local service provider. They provide a V35 termination at the user end, and some providers even give G703, some others provide fiber termination, and yeah, that depends on the service provider. So we have to use V35 modems at our end to bridge between the lease line and the router. In this scenario, we use a 2 Mbps MROTech V35 lease line modem. Now what concerns us is routers. We are using Cisco ISR series routers both at head office and branch office. For head office, we use Cisco 2801 ISR router, and for the branch office, we use a Cisco 1841 ISR router. Besides, we need V35 cables, smart serial converters and patch cords to complete the physical connectivity. Now let's have a look at these things in detail. First, we will discuss about the lease line. I'll show you the lease line in our office now. Please have a look at it. Here you can see that the lease line cable, that's an RS-232 standard cable at our end. This is then connected to one end of a connector and the other end is connected to a UTP cable with a RJ45 jack. And this jack is plugged into the GSH DSL port of the modem. We'll discuss about the GSH DSL port when we talk about the modems. For now, just keep in mind that it's a port in the modem where the lease line is terminated. This is the lease line that we have at our office, and we will be using this lease line connectivity for the purpose of this video. Now we can go on to the modems. As we discussed earlier, we use a V35 modem for this video. One thing to keep in mind is that customers use V35, G703 or Ethernet termination based on provider line type. A few differences are there between V35 and G703 lines. If you want more details about it, please download the configuration documents from www.timenetlearning.com. Next, we will have a look at the modem which we use in our office. And this is the modem that we were talking about, the MROTech V35. You can see the different ports here. The DB60 interface here is to which we connect the V35 cable. You can also see the GSH DSL port right there to which we connect the lease line that you saw before in this video. And it also has a standard power supply port. If you want to configure or see the line card which is used in this modem, you can unscrew the card and have a look at it. The configuration of this modem is based on two switches on the V35 line card. These switches are called dip switches. You can see them right here. The on-off status of these switches will determine the working of the modem. For detailed configurations of the modem, you can log on to www.timenetlearning.com. You can find the documentations there. Now we can screw the card back to the modem. Next comes the routers. As you all know, generally routers are used to interconnect different networks. The routers that we are going to use in our head office is a Cisco 2801 router, which has higher data handling capacity and multiple slots for interface cards. I will now show you the Cisco 2801 router and its interfaces. This is a 2801 router. You can see different ports and interface slots there. I will explain them one by one. Here you can see the slots for inserting different types of interface cards. For example, this is a smart serial interface card which has been inserted to an interface card slot. This is another one, and including this one, we have 3 serial interface for this router. Understand one thing, that these are WAN interface cards and are used to connect external lines to the router. In our case, the connectivity from the leased line modem will be connected to this WAN interface. And this is a flash memory where the router's IOS is saved. These are 2 fast Ethernet ports through which our LAN will be connected to this router. And this is the console port through which we configure the router using command line interface. Now we can have a look at this branch office router, which is a standard Cisco 1841 router. Compared to the Cisco 2801, this one has lower number of interface card slots. This is the front panel of the 1841 router, and this is the rear panel. Now we can have a detailed look at the ports and interface card slots. This is the first serial port that we have on this router. This is the console port through which we configure the router using command line interface, and these are the 2 fast Ethernet ports. And here is the second slot which supports multiple types of interface cards based on customer requirement, and this is a flash memory. We have been talking about interface cards for a while now. So to make you understand, we will show you how to insert an interface card in a router. This is a serial interface card that we are going to insert into this router. To insert an interface card into a router, we have to choose where to insert it. Then remove the protective cover of the slot. Then we will gently put the card into the slot, and when you feel that it's seated properly, push it a little bit and then screw it into the slot. Now let's check the cables and connectivity that we are going to use. I hope you are all aware of UTP cables, so I am not going to show them to you. But here we use some cables for the connectivity between the router and the modem, and also between the router and the PC for the configuration process. We will use V35 cables, Smart Serial to V35 converter, and Ethernet patch cords. I'll show you the V35 cable and the Smart Serial to V35 converter so that you can familiarize them. So let's have a look at them. These are the 2 cables that we will be using for the connectivity between the modem and the router. This one is a V35 cable with a Winchester female connector on one end and a DB60 connector on the other end. The blue one is a V35 to Smart Serial converter cable which has a Winchester male pin on one end and a Smart Serial connector on the other. We can now interconnect these 2 cables so that it makes a DB60 connector on one end and a Smart Serial on the other. We use this set of cables to connect between the modem and the router during the configuration. The next step is to establish the physical connectivity between the devices in the head office. So let's see how to do this. The first step is to fix the router in a rack, which can be a wall mounted rack or a normal server rack based on number of devices we use. Here at the head office we use a 42U rack, and in branch office we use a 4U wall mount rack. To fix these routers and switches, we need a rack mount kit which is normally included with the router pack. Now the router is fixed in a rack, so now we move on to the physical connectivity part. First, connect the leased line to the GHS DSL port of the modem. Then we will connect the V35 cable to the DB60 interface of the modem. The other end of the cable will be connected to the smart serial converter, and the smart serial interface will be connected to the router. From the router's fast Ethernet interface, the connectivity goes to a switch, and then from the switch to the servers and user PCs. The connectivity between all the devices needed for the configuration has been completed. The same type of connectivity is done in the case of branch office as well. Please have a look at the connectivity in the branch office now. Here, we fixed routers and switches in a 4U wall mounted rack because of less number of devices. To complete the physical connectivity, we need to do the same steps that we did at the head office. Now, the physical connectivity between these two offices has been done. From the head office servers and branch office user PCs are connected using Ethernet cables, switches, routers, modems and a leased line as shown in the diagram. Now we can move on to the configuration part. First, we will be configuring the head office and then the branch office. To configure the router, connect the router console port to a PC serial port. I know you're all well aware of how to do this, and then we will use a tool to access the command line interface of the router. We have a lot of software available for this purpose, like Hyperterminal, PuTTY or Secure CRT. We use PuTTY here to connect to the command line of the router, which is free tool available for download. Let's see how it has been done. After opening the PuTTY software on the PC, to which I have connected the console cable from the router, we should specify that we are going to use the serial port and also the port number. In our case, it's COM port 18. We have specified it there. We are also changing the font size so that you can have a better view of what we are typing in the command line. We are now connecting to the head office router. To configure this router, we will be using a step-by-step process. Please see standard steps to complete the configuration part. So we will do these steps one by one. First, we will change the host name of the router to HQ router to represent headquarters. Next, we will set up an enable password for router access security using enable password command. Now, we will assign an IP address to the serial interface to which the leased line modem is connected. We will assign it as IP 192.168.70.1 and a subnet mask of 255.255.255.252 using the IP address command. We will give the no shutdown command to enable the interface. Then, we will enter into the fast Ethernet interface of the router. We will assign an IP address of 192.168.20.1 and a subnet mask of 255.255.255.0 to that interface using the same commands that we use in the serial interface. This will be the interface connecting to our office LAN. Now we are going to enter into the leased line configurations. First, we need to set the encapsulation to PPP using the command encapsulation PPP, and please notice that we are entering it while we are on serial interface to which the leased line is connected. Now, we have to set the type of authentication to CHAP. For this, we will use the command PPP authentication CHAP. After this, exit the serial interface, and in the global configuration mode, we have to create a username and password for the router on the other end to authenticate. Using the username and password command, we have to create a username, and it's very important that the username you create should be the host name of the router in the branch office. You also need to create a password for that. After this, we can use the show IP interface brief command to see the status of the interface. But there you can see that the protocol status of the serial port 0/3/0 is down. This is because we need to configure the other router on the other end of the leased line to get this up and running. Now we will add a static route pointing to the branch office LAN subnet. We will use the command iproute 192.168.3.0 255.255.255.0 serial 0/3/0. Instead of the serial port address, you can also give the IP address of the router in the other end of the leased line. So it's completed. Before moving to the branch office router, we have to save the configuration in this route using the command copy running config startup config or write memory. You can use the show IP interface brief command to see the current status of the interfaces. So we will now go to the branch office and configure the Cisco 1841 router there. I'm already connected to the branch office router using PuTTY. We will first go and change the host name to BR router. Next, we will set up an enable password for this router. Then we will configure the serial 0/0/0 interface with the IP 192.168.70.2. Then we will get into the fast Ethernet 0/0 port and will give the IP address 192.168.3.1. Then we have to give the no shutdown command to bring the interface up. After configuring the interfaces, we will go on with the encapsulation PPP command and then the PPP authentication chap to enable the chap authentication as we did in the head office router. And now we need to set up the username and password for the chap authentication as we did on the head office router. In the case of branch office router, the username will be the name of the head office router and we will also create a password. At this point, you will see that the status of the serial port of the router becomes up. This means that the leased line is through now. Now, we have to add the routing part. In branch office router, we will create a route to the head office LAN network through the serial port where the leased line is connected. Now, we will add the static route to the branch office router using the command iproute 192.168.20.0 255.255.255.0 serial 0/0/0. We will now save the configuration to the router's flash using the command copy running config startup config. You can use the show IP interface brief command to see the status of the interface. And we can also use show running configuration command to see the running configuration. This command will show you all the settings that you have served in this router. That's it. Now we completed the configuration part. So we will test the connectivity using the ping command. Try to ping to a server which is on the other end of the lease line. As you can see, it's working fine. We will test the lease line from the branch office by accessing an email server located at the head office. As I told you earlier in this video, after completing the configurations, I connected the lease line to my production network. So if everything is working properly, I must be able to access a web page of my Exchange server running in the head office. I am now connected to a Windows XP machine in the branch office. I will show you the IP address of the PC using ipconfig command. You can see that it is 192.168.3.150, which is the LAN range of the branch office. I will now open up an Internet Explorer window and I will type in the address of my email server's web page. And here we are in the login page of the Exchange server. I will log in with the username and password. And here I am in my email account. This confirms that we have established the connectivity between these two offices using the lease line. With this, we have completed the configuration of our lease line connectivity. From now onwards, the users in both the offices will be able to share their data using the lease